My name is Angelique Piwinski. Aside from being a historian and a lot of other things in the city of Yonkers, I'm also a member of the vestry of this church, historic St. John's Episcopal Church in Getty Square. The church is the mother church of all churches in Yonkers. It was Yonkers' first church. The congregation was formed in 1693, and the first church was built on this spot in 1753. The church underwent a whole bunch of different expansions as the membership grew. To the present size, they wanted to find an architect who can incorporate as much as possible of the original church. That wall remains the only piece now that remains of the original church, but by design. And those doors, the two doors in the middle, are the original doors to the original church. During the American Revolution, this was a hospital for both sides. It was neutral territory, so wounded from both the British and the Patriot side came in. Also underneath, which we can't get into that portion of the basement, but there's a strong suspicion that some of the Revolutionary War soldiers are buried under there. It's all bricked, blocked and everything.
My name is Victoria Shirota. I'm the priest in charge at St. John's Episcopal Church in Getty Square, Yonkers. We're delighted that you're here in our sanctuary and that you can see how beautifully it's been renovated and restored after smoke and water damage from the fire that happened next door in 2015. And we're so grateful to the firefighters and the mayor who had the courage to come out in the middle of the night and tell the firefighters that we had to be saved because we were historic.
When you look around and look at the stained glass memorials of different events in the city's history, that is a very, very early Tiffany window. It is a priceless window. What a magnificent place to think about God. She was born in 1857 and died in 1886, so she was in her 30s. It is simply one block of marble, but I can imagine how long it took these artists to do this and to get it here in one piece at a time when they didn't have trucking and the shipping kind of things we have today. Beautiful bronze. They knew how to work back then. 1888. In the fretwork up there are words. He brought me into his banqueting house, that's that side, and his banner over me was love. That is the Civil War's Union Army, and importantly, the Women's Relief Corps, which particularly today, as we finally begin to celebrate women's contributions, that people were progressive at the time to recognize the importance of women to the war effort at the time. There was a family, the Cochran family, descended from the Alexander Smith and Sons Carpet Company, the largest carpet company in America. The family gave back enormous amounts of money, and particularly Eva Smith Cochran. They instilled in their daughter Eva the Victorian ideal of you're only a caretaker of money, it's not yours. Your mission in life is to find things to do for your fellow man with it. She was able to build the rectory. She built the stone wall around the church. This is St. John's cold water fountain. The beauty of this fountain is it was a cold water fountain in the era of when refrigeration did not exist. So how could it be a cold water fountain, and why would somebody put a cold water fountain in the middle of here? Two things. The Cochran family were very much into people not drinking. And the only place to get a drink in those days was to go to a saloon. There were more saloons at that time in the 1890s than there were today. What they did is they realized that, okay, if we put a fountain that always has cold water in it, those people may not have to go to the bar to get a cold drink. Top half was lined with hay and blocks of ice were put in. Cold air sinks, so that water was 40 degrees. And so it ran forever, and the actual cool thing about it is that is Tiffany. It's a Tiffany bronze of St. John. The Celtic cross is also Tiffany. So we have two amazing things here. And most people walk by and they don't even know. The magnificence of the place, you can feel the spirits that go back to the 1600s. It is truly incredible. There's one other thing that I want to talk about, and that is the bell to the church, which we can't see inside here, but there is a rope that pulls it, but it doesn't work anymore. A few years back, it pulled one too many times, and it broke. We are in historic Phillips Manor Hall. It is the oldest standing building in the county of Westchester, and of course the oldest standing building in Yonkers. Welcome to my house. This building began construction in 1682, almost 100 years before the American Revolution. This particular room is my personal favorite. The manor house was constructed by the first Frederick Phillips I. And this is a portrait. He was wealthy. He was given a grant of 20,000 acres. He had a son, Frederick Phillips II. In his will, he left money that St. John's Church would be built. His son, Frederick Phillips III, was supposed to build it by what's now Oakland Cemetery in St. John's, but decided he didn't want to have to travel to church that far, so he built it a couple blocks from here. But literally, it could be seen from here because there was nothing here. In fact, right in front of the house was the Nepperhan River, as the Native Americans called it. Later, it became known as the Sawmill River because there were sawmills that were dotted along the river. They used the river to turn wheels that did all the work for them. And the river still flows underneath. What's so important about this room is that this man, Frederick Phillips II, had a daughter, Mary Phillips. At the time, George Washington was in this vicinity doing a lot of stuff. It was his first love. We know that when George Washington was dating Mary Phillips of Phillips Manor Hall, there was only one church to go to, and he was very religious. He prayed on Valentine Hill before the Battle of White Plains. He was courting Mary Phillips at Phillips Manor Hall. We know he proposed to her, and we also know that she turned him down. And that would have dramatically changed the course of history had that union happened. However, she chose to marry a British soldier by the name of Roger Morris. She married in 1758, right here, where I'm standing in this room. The whole family had ultimately swore allegiance to Great Britain. And of course, we know who lost the war. The Phillips family lost all of their 52,000 acres, all the lands and property. They seized everything. This is who George Washington married. This is Martha Washington. So history was made in this room. This room also was the room that George Washington would sleep in when he was traveling, and they would accommodate him. And above us is one of the 3 oldest papier-mâché ceilings in the United States. It is from the 1700s. Yeah, I mean, there's only one of 3 in the United States. I can't even get my, paint your ceiling every couple of years. This one is hundreds of years old. The detail work, particularly the busts of the people and the birds. I'm not sure what hung from the central medallion, probably an oil lamp. When Frederick Phillips got here, he had to build a sawmill because he had the river. This is wood that would have come from the trees around here. Wide board, most likely pine, but look at the size of the actual width of these pieces and think about what kind of tree that had to be. You look at the hardware, I believe is the original hardware, built to last. Same thing with the staircase, all the spindles. A couple have been recreated because over time, children have destroyed it. The first Frederick Phillips had 11 children living in this house. So 11 children do a lot of fun stuff. These tiles are original tiles. The firebacks are original firebacks. The place was really deteriorated because it had been so overused as City Hall, and the city had no money to restore it. Eva Smith Cochran stepped forward and said, I will restore this house and I will give it back to the state of New York for safekeeping forever. Her son Alexander thought, well, it's great, I'm going to do all this stuff, but I want something more to be attached to this house. So he sought the advice of many. He realized that the best way of having this always be a museum would be to attach art to it. He searched the world for presidential portraits that were painted At the time, the president was in office by someone so the president was sitting in front of the artist. It's an amazing collection. John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson. Rutherford B. Hayes was one of the presidents. Abraham Lincoln.
He looked younger here, that too.
Yeah, less stressed. James Monroe authored the Monroe Doctrine, all about isolationism, like we shouldn't have to deal with the rest of the world. Let's just take care of our own selves. History repeats itself many times. It's just that it's not in our lifetime. So therefore, if you don't study history, you won't know it. What we have now is an exhibit about Yonkers immigration. That's actually up right now.
These cannons right here are howitzers that were from the Civil War. I actually don't know the actual time period for these cannons. And that cannon right there in the corner is from the Spanish-American War fought in the Philippines. People think that these are replicas. These are actual real deal.
Every inch of this property is historic. When you think of the American Revolution, and this was neutral ground, but there were still cannonballs flying all over the place. And we're not even allowed to dig anywhere on the property, even to put a signpost in. The Nepperhan River still flows underneath. A few years back, the city decided that they should uncover or daylight a piece of it. And what they did essentially was knock a hole through this big flume that covered it in around 1917 because it was so polluted they had to cover it. 10% of the water now flows into this daylighting project, but the rest of it still flows underneath and into the Hudson River. Before the white people ever came, there was an Indian village here of 3,000 people that were very happy before they were invaded by the quote-unquote immigrants. 50% of them were murdered, massacred. Oakland Cemetery, it sounds morbid,
No, I love
but
cemeteries.
Oakland Cemetery is like the graves talk to me because it's all the people from the past. We just restored this window over here. It is a window that was donated in memorial of Edward Underhill, who was the original founder of the Yonkers Brewery. This is the Trolley Barn. The Trolley Barn was where all of the trolleys originally emanated from, and where you see the Chase Bank and the theater, and then Yonkers Brewing and the pizza market were all the main doors where the trolleys would come in and out. It's 3 levels, and each level was used to maintain and repair the trolleys. The building is structurally incredibly sound and can withstand tons of weight, which is why it's built like a fortress. And it was restored only a couple years ago, and they did a beautiful job of it. So we are here in the Yonkers Brewery, or the Yonkers Brewing Company. The Yonkers Brewing Company is actually the second company named for Yonkers Brewing. The original one was based on Chicken Island, which is no longer an island and is no longer in existence. But Chicken Island as a place exists. So it's not an island, but it's basically a giant parking lot right now. So Chicken Island was home to the brewery and a few other local businesses way back in the day. The original brewery went out of business a long, long time ago, and these folks had the brilliant idea of picking up the trademark and recreating the whole brewery idea. Around the brewery, given its history, there are a whole lot of different photos. Yonkers is home to many different things and a lot of different firsts at different points in history. This is a photograph of the first golf course in America that was played up off of North Broadway. The golf course itself doesn't exist anymore, but that's where it all started, around 1888. This photo actually came from me. This is a photograph of Main Street in the 1860s. You can see there's stone building slabs here that was used for construction. The area was largely an area where there was a lot of building materials, sawmills, places where raw materials could be bought for building. This photograph over here was actually a trolley wreck. One of the trolleys went off the track and smashed into some buildings. So they also had issues way back then, just like we have today. This particular photograph here is the Hudson Fulton celebration of 1909. This was the 300th anniversary of the quote-unquote discovery of the Hudson River, they called it homecoming. And basically what people would do is come back to their hometowns all along the Hudson, up from New York City all the way up to Albany. All the river towns, everything else had this major thing. In 1909, they made a big deal. At that time, Yonkers had a population of about 100,000 people. 200,000 people were present for this celebration, which was an amazing explosion of people. And at that time, people made a big deal of their celebration. At those times, they didn't have radio or television or anything, any form of music other than live instruments. So bands, parades, all that stuff was part of what they did. So this was the third train station that was on this site. When the trains came through in 1839, it was just kind of a crappy wooden thing. This one was built in 1911. When you look at the terracotta tiles, they're the same tiles that they used in Grand Central. When they had telegraphs, there's a telegraph room, which is kind of neat. There's the bronze radiators. And then you've got your quarter-sawed white oak veneered waiting benches.
This is Haifa.
This is my friend Haifa, and she is the artist for lots of the stuff in the downtown area of Yonkers. She did a lot of the artwork.
Most of my work reflects my passion for history in the city of Yonkers, as well as community members and the city that is made up of quiet voices that you often don't hear but are very important.
The cleanup?
Science March in the city. We did 4 miles.
Oh my God.
Yeah, in January we did the Women's March.
We just left Seeds Are the Future event that Grayson puts on, Grayson Community Gardens puts on every year.
Market cleanup
this morning. Hudson River Community Association has their annual cleanup of Warburton. It's been a busy morning, and the Science Barge opening happened today.
Is that all you did?
That's all we did today. You know,
Oh my God.
just a few things.
Hi, beautiful. How are you?
This is my friend Hector Santiago.
Hector the connector.
I stop and shake.
Awesome.
No matter where I go, I saw that Walgreens one.
It's a social icebreaker to help communicate between police and community members. It just helps build neighbors. You know, sometimes we live next to each other, we don't even say hi to each other, or it's socially awkward just to approach someone. Now with the stop and shake, you know what that person is approaching you. It's so cool. It's such an awesome de-escalator for police and community.
Yonkers, New York, the city of hills, the city of gracious living. Some famous people from the wonderful city of Yonkers are Ella Fitzgerald, Songbird, Jadakiss, hip hop. We have Mary J. Blige, the queen of hip hop. Steven Tyler of Aerosmith, Miss Bakeland of the Bakelite Plastic, actor John Voight, Sid Caesar, who happens to have a street named after him in the center of Getty Square. The Yonkers Pier is the only Victorian age steel pier still left in existence.
Samuel Untitled. He was a lawyer. He was the first lawyer in America to make $1 million on a case. The 99-room mansion that stood right behind us, nobody could afford to keep it. It took 3 months to demolish that mansion. It was built by John T. Waring, who owned the largest hat manufacturing plant in America. 1868 to 1870, he built this huge stone mansion that sat there.
It's a great place for a mansion to sit.
He then died, and then he sold it to Samuel Tilden, who was the governor of New York. He ran for president. We are at historic Untermeyer Gardens. This is the Persian garden that Samuel Untermeyer built in 1916. So he had 60 greenhouses and 60 full-time gardeners. When he bought the estate from Samuel Tilden, it was at auction, and he bought 120 some odd acres, and including the original 99-room mansion that stood outside of here for $120,000, which was a lot of money back in 1899. It actually was June 7th, 1899. What he would do is he'd open up these gardens at different points in time to the public, even though they're his personal gardens. The gardens are slowly being restored. People love to come here and enjoy, and especially kids. Many of the objects that you see are priceless artifacts from the Roman Empire, from other places that you would not expect to see in the city of Yonkers. So I think in retrospect, a lot of the places that we visited, a lot of the places that we heard about are stories that you would never expect to encounter in a city called Yonkers. But Yonkers has one of the richest histories of any city in the United States, and that's the truth. From the most magnificent Persian garden in probably North America, to all of the history that surrounds this specific place where a presidential candidate in 1876 owned this place, a person who had the largest hat factory in the world who owned this place, and to Samuel Untermeyer, who was one of the most preeminent lawyers in America and who did a lot of social good while he was alive. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about my philosophy of life. So here's a little bit about the way I think about life. I think life is a wonderful journey. I think that life is a continuous road of discovery where you try to figure yourself out, and then when you do, it's a wonderful thing that happens. I also believe that we are all given a challenge in life, and it may not be apparent at birth, but it comes later. And your job is to figure out the challenge. Your job is to overcome the challenge. Your job is to become a role model for those who may have the same challenge. I also believe that as a historian, what you see is priceless treasures that were once someone else's, and probably someone else's before that. Even when you look at some of these objects that are in this park, they belong to many, many people. Everything that we own is only rented and only borrowed. It's really important not to overdo and worrying about stuff. The greatest gift you can give anyone is your time, because you'll never get it back, ever. And to me, that's powerful. I've made it a personal mission to bring to life a lot of the history that is really largely unknown. I think we have so much here to celebrate. It should be taught in our schools. If our youth knew how important this place was, they would be proud to live here. They wouldn't diss our city, they would embrace where they live. They then will carry it forward and teach their own children, and so on. That's why I do this. That's my own personal mission. It's all volunteer. I care about history, I care about diversity, and especially inclusion, because we have so many ethnic groups here. So much is at stake that the more inclusion we have in our city, where all the voices are heard, the more powerful the solutions to problems can be when everyone participates. And then the last mission is just simply to be a nice person, and I guess to represent the transgender community. And we're people too, and we're the kind of people that, the community is marginalized a lot, which is sad, but we're just the same kind of people as everybody else, and so I think that's kind of me in a nutshell. And maybe it is a nutshell, but with accent on the word nut, but I love my life, and this is what I do, and that is me. Sorry, that was a colonial era sneeze.